Hey everybody, so in this video I'm going to be going over CO2, which was a easy web challenge from the Down Under CTF 2024. I figure if you're watching this video, you probably attempted it in the CTF and either couldn't figure out how to exploit the vulnerability or couldn't find the vulnerability. So I'm going to go over the challenge with that in mind, hopefully kind of show how you could have figured out where the vulnerability was and then how to exploit it. And this is an easy challenge. I mean, it's rated easy. And if you know the vulnerability, it's actually pretty straightforward and easy. But I think this is a deceptively difficult challenge because the vulnerability is not really immediately obvious. And I can easily see there being a lot of people who couldn't find the vulnerability and it being pretty frustrating, because if we look at the code for a simple application, there's actually a lot going on in terms of little rabbit holes you can fall down. I mean, if we look at the routes py file, which is the instructions for the web server on how to handle requests to the various endpoints, I mean, we see there's registering and logging in, there's profiles, and there's, blog, and you can edit blogs and you can make posts, and then there's these utility functions, which is like merging stuff and writing things to disk. And so there's a lot, many challenges, especially at the easier level. You might not know how to exploit it, or the difficulty might be in figuring out how to do what you want to do, but a lot of the times you at least kind of have an idea of, oh, okay, this sort of makes sense. And here I don't feel like without experience, you're going to be able to just quickly spot what the vulnerability is. So when you find yourself in a challenge like that, where you've gone through the source code and you've kind of looked at everything, you've messed around with the site, and you're like you don't have a clear direction, it's really easy to just start jumping into stuff, falling down different rabbit holes. And I think a more efficient approach is to remember that, right, these are goal-oriented challenges. There's a flag and we need to get the flag. So the important thing first off is to always identify where is the flag? Is it in the database? Is it in a file on the computer? Just figuring out how to get the flag or where the flag is can give us a lot of insight into the direction we want to take in terms of what to start looking at first. And this challenge, we see that the flag is going to be returned to us if we visit the get flag endpoint and we're logged in. And if this flag variable is the string true, it's going to return the flag to us. Now that kind of, I think, helps us in a way to narrow down, if we're going to do, probabilistically, what should we start looking at first? We can maybe think that, okay, all of this registering and logging in stuff, we don't need to be an admin to get the flag. It's not one of those challenges where it's only, we're gonna have to steal an admin cookie, or we need to try and circumvent, or privilege escalation or doing stuff like that. We just simply have to be logged in. So if we just kind of assume the login and registration is just normal website stuff and not where the vulnerability is, that kind of narrows down where we want to start looking. And also, this flag equals true. Well, the flag variable is set up here. It's reading this os.getEnd flag. And if we look at that, it's just a variable in a file. Now, this is another spot where I think you could potentially maybe fall into some traps, in that you could think okay, we need to change this file to have the flag equal true. And you could end up getting wrapped up into this save feedback to disk, right? Because it's writing stuff to disk. So maybe you're thinking okay, maybe there's some vulnerability in somewhere in all of these, and we could get it to overwrite that file. Well, one of the problems with that is this flag variable is set when this file is loaded. So even if we were able to overwrite the .env file and change flag to true, it's not going to change it. This is sitting in, this value for flag is sitting in memory in the application. So if we were to overwrite the file, we'd actually have to restart the service. And that's not really something we can do in this kind of environment. And that also kind of leads us sort of in another direction, in that, like, to change this variable, we're going to need to do something kind of like, dynamically. It's not reading a file. It's not, some remote code execution. Well, I guess if we did have remote code execution, we could just read this file and the flag would be in there. But that's not usually how they would do that in challenges. So it's still a little, like, I don't know, fuzzy on what to do, but it can still kind of eliminate things. We could think about, like, okay, we don't need to fall down this rabbit hole because maybe it's probably not in there. The other thing is to remember it's an easy challenge, or it's rated easy. So the challenge creator ultimately wants us to find the flag. So if we look at the challenge, the only place in all of the code where there's actual comments is in the init.py file, which is talking about to ensure the routes are imported. And then in the routes file itself, where it talks, there's some comment above this feedback function. And then there is some comment directly over this merge function. So that's kind of steering us. If we just were like, had no idea what was going on, we had to take a wild guess, like, okay, where's the vulnerability? Like, I feel like the most likely place to find it would be in this merge function, because that's sort of where we're being steered. So if we're going to fall down some rabbit holes, I think the first one we should try and fall down is merge. And if we look at merge, depending on your level of coding experience, this could either look like gobbledygook or a pretty simple recursive function. And ironically, I think the more experience you have might make this actually even harder to find the code, because if you just see this as gobbledygook, you might not have the experience to just be like, oh, it's not, I don't know, it's just merging some stuff. It's not, I don't see where we could find a vulnerability. But let's actually jump into Python and take a closer look at this stuff. So I'm going to copy the merge function. We're going to put it into Python, and then I'm also going to put in that feedback class. And we're just going to take a look at some stuff. So I'm going to create an instance of the feedback class, just exactly how it's done in that code, right? I just renamed it foo because it'll make it easier to talk about. But we see when we're submitting feedback, right, it's taking some data from a request we sent, and then it's creating an instance of that object, and it's merging that data with the feedback. And if we go and look, I already went to the website, created an account, and submitted some feedback. And this, if you're not familiar, this is Burp Suite. It's just a tool that lets you save and log all the requests back and forth from the website. And when we submit to the save feedback endpoint, we see basically this is what's getting submitted. A title, a content, a rating, and some referred. So if we go back into our Python shell, and let's put that in there. All right. So if we look at the merge function, and I'm not going to go like super in depth over it, but if we just kind of look at it, right, the first thing it's doing is the source is this data dictionary, and the destination is our feedback object, foo. So this is just kind of standard Python for key value and source items. So if we were to actually look at what we get when we call items, we're going to see we get these tuples, objects of title. So for key value in these, the key would be, for the first one would be title, and the value would be just some title, and then the key would be content, and yada, yada, yada. And then we see it's calling this Python function has attribute on foo. So it's saying if our foo, which is our feedback object, has the attribute get item, we're going to enter this code path. Well, let's just see if it even has it. So has attribute we're looking at foo, and it was, what was it, get item? Yeah, get item. It helps if I can spell or type, actually. Jeez, what am I doing wrong? I cannot type as ATTR. Where did I? Ass. So it doesn't have that. So we can maybe kind of ignore this branch right now anyway. And then it's asking if we have the attribute for the first key, right, in that data we're sending in. If the foo object has that key, this part will treat. So let's look at that. If has, type it out, right? Foo, and the first key was title, right? Well, it does, right? Because we know that this feedback object, foo, has a title, a content, a rating, and referred. And then this is asking if the type of the value, which is just this string, some type text, is a dictionary. It's not. So we can skip that. Then what it's doing is it's setting the attribute of foo, the key of foo, so foo.title, which right now is nothing, right? It's empty string, because when it was created with nothing. Like, see, it's initialized with empty string. So foo.title is nothing. But this merge function then is going to set foo.title to the title that we pass in this one. So after we merge, it would be just some title. And then it's going to keep doing that with all those. And the stuff that we kind of skipped over, and this is where the recursive nature comes in, is essentially if one of our objects was a dictionary, then it would call itself again and on merge. And then now the source would be the dictionary of the value. And then I don't want to get into recursion too much, but essentially, if we had a whole bunch of nested dictionaries, this merge function would still sort of like do what it was supposed to do. So kind of understand what it's doing now, right? It's just taking, so like if we actually merged them, so we'll merge data and foo. And what we should have now is foo should have, instead of these being empty, it should be the stuff that we put into it. So if we looked at foo.title, it should be our title, and foo.content should be our content. All right, so kind of makes sense. Where's the vulnerability, right? Like if, you know, what's going on? Because if we're from the sort of like base level to, depending on your experience, you might just think like, well, I don't know, like the only thing that's in foo, like if we're listing the variables of foo, it's just a title, a content, a rating, and referred. Like, how are we going to get a vulnerability out of that? Well, we see Python is actually calling this has attribute. That's how it's checking whether or not our foo object contains one of the things that we're trying to merge it with. Well, in Python, we can list all the attributes of an object with this dir method. And if we look at foo, all of a sudden, we still have this content, rating, referred, and title, but now we've got all this other stuff. And what is all this other stuff? Well, these in Python are called dunder methods or magic methods. It's kind of like what is, I don't even really know how to describe it, but it's essentially just more things that are accessible to an object in Python. I don't know, you can kind of think of it maybe as like sort of the behind the scenes stuff. Like if we look at foo, right? So if we look at foo, we'll look at the very first one. What this is saying is foo class, this is actually returning, it's referencing this feedback class, right? So yeah, it's capitalized. That's our feedback. And there's these other ones like string. When you call the string method on an object, like if you just print an object, a lot of times it'll return, like if we print data. So data, remember, is our title stuff. Like if we were to just print data, what's happening is behind the scenes, Python is calling the string method from data. So if we actually looked at data, here, let's look at what attributes are available on data, right? There's all of these. And one of them somewhere is going to be the string. So if we were to actually call the string method on data, so I'm going to show what the method is. This is, hey, it's a method wrapper for string of a dictionary object. So it's referencing the string method that's built into dictionary objects. And if we were to call that string, it prints that out. And that's what happens when you call print on a dictionary object. It calls that string method. Now, for the sake of this example here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slightly change our feedback class. And I'm going to add a string method to it. And what this is going to do then is it's just going to return the string that is, it's going to return the title and what the title is and the content and what the content is. So now we've put in a string method in our class. So if we initialize an instance of foo with this new class, and then we were to print foo, now it's going to call the string method from feedback, which we know is going to print the title and the content, and we don't have any currently, so it should just be that empty stuff. And if we do our merge, same again, foo and data, or data and foo. Now if we were to print foo, we can see, hey, it's working. And if we were to call, actually that won't work because it's a class thing. Let's go back to our attributes. I think how I wanted to explain this. Probably should have thought all this before I started rambling in a video. So what we can do then is when it's calling has attribute in our code, this merge function, what if we gave it one of these? It would look to see, does foo have the attribute? Like let's say we were going to change something like whatever, has attribute. Does foo have the attribute? Does it have a class attribute, right? And it's going to be true because it's one of the attributes. So we could change our data. Remember, our dictionary is stuff we're trying to merge. We could put a class in there and then be able to change stuff behind these magic methods in Python. And this is where our vulnerability comes in. We can change all that behind the scenes stuff. Well, which is another good news in that what we're trying to change, right, is this flag variable that's been dynamically, like it's loaded, it's just sitting in memory. Like how are we supposed to get it, to access it, to change it? Well, what if there was a way to use these things to get at that? So one of these methods is, if we look at, let's go back to our foo. One of them is this init. And what it's doing is it's accessing when you initialize, like when we did foo equals feedback, behind the scenes, Python called the init method of the class, right? That's how this all got loaded. So what if we wanted to try to change some other stuff? Like just for an example, I'll show like what if we wanted to change the string method in the class. So let's create a new method. We'll just call it blah. And for reasons I won't get into, we're gonna have to give it a parameter. And then now instead of, we'll just return hello. That's all it's gonna do. So what if now instead of our title just being, or our data just being all that stuff, let's change some stuff. Let's say now some new title. And then this class dunder method is actually referencing the class. So if we do, I think I showed this before, but just in case, if we do foo.class, right? What it's returning is that main is the feedback class, the reference to that actual this class, and the class, the new one I just added, has this string method. So if I wanted to change some new title, and let's put in that class now. So now when that recursive function is called, when merge is called, it's gonna say, hey, does our foo have the attribute class? Well, yeah, it does. And we're actually gonna, because of the way it works, we need to do some nested dictionaries here. And then in that class, we want to, let's access that string method. And let's change that string method. Now, instead of it being this string method there, let's make it be that method we created, just the blah, that all it's going to do is return hello. So now when it's merged, it's going to do its little recursive merging. It's going to say, hey, does foo have a class? Yep. And then it's going to get called again. And it's going to be like, does class have a string method? Yep. Blah, you know, on down the line, we could keep doing. And now if we merge them, let's merge data and foo. If we look at foo, well, if we print foo, so before when we printed foo, it returned the title and the content. And now what we're thinking is going to happen is it's going to change and it's going to return this new method. So if we were to print foo, it's just going to print hello. Like we changed the method for this class by using this merge function. So that's your vulnerability. And the thing we need to change is this flag variable. Well, the other way Python works, right? This class is defined in the routes.py file. And in this init function, anything you were to put inside here would have access to this flag variable because of the way scoping works. Like this is defined in this object or in this file, and flag is a global variable of the routes file. Like we could actually have it say like, you know, flag equals whatever. And an instance, this variable would essentially get changed. So what we could do is if we could somehow access the init method of feedback, we would have access to this flag variable. Well, we can do that. So let's go back to our burp suite. And like if we go to the website, what was it? Get flag. It returns that nope, right? Because the value of that variable right now is set to false, and we want it set to the string true, right? We want to change it to flag equals true. So if we go in and we're going to do, we know anything we send in here is getting merged into that feedback function. So let's add. Oops. I'm going to send this to repeater, which just is lets us send requests. And now let's add that class, just like how we did when we wanted to change the string method. We made a dictionary, except now instead of changing the string method, let's access the init function, right? And we know in the init function, we had access, it has access to the variables, the global variables. So we can then say there's another dunder method called globals, and that is the global variables. And since we're called the init method of the feedback class had access, flag was one of the global variables it had access to, we can change flag to be whatever we wanted, and we want it to be the string true. So now when these are all merged, it should do just like how it did when we changed the string, except we found a path that would change the flag. So now we're going to send that. And in the memory of the server that's running, the flag variable should now be true. So when we hit that endpoint, it should give us the flag, which it does. So you might be thinking like, well, okay, hopefully that makes sense. But you might be thinking like, gee, how the heck was I ever supposed to figure that out, right? Like just this innocuous looking merge function, if you don't have the experience to know that there's all these other things accessible in Python, or that merge functions, like I only knew So basically the way I saw the merge function, I immediately knew what it was because I've seen this kind of thing before. Usually in JavaScript, it's called like prototype pollution. And I know that you can also sort of do the same thing in Python. So then from there, I just Googled Python prototype pollution because I couldn't remember exactly how to get to where I wanted to go. And then doing a little bit on Google, I figured out then, okay, yeah, I can access the class and then the init method, and then that'll have globals, blah, 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 blah. But you might be thinking like, well, how the hell would I ever learn that? One of the things you can do, like if we're pretty sure we think it's in the merge method, like I think one of the things that you could do was just Google the merge function. And if we do that, like let's just Google that and see what comes up. We're just going to put that right in Google. And look at one of the first things that pops up. Prototype pollution in Python, some guy's blog. And somewhere in here has the merge code, which is literally the exact same code, except it has a comment. And from here, you can read all about it and get to understand it. But you at least now, prototype pollution in Python, then you can Google that. Prototype pollution Python. Now you kind of have an idea of maybe what it is, and we can go to like say Hacktricks and look at it. And again, it's going to show the exact same function. And it's going to talk about gadgets. So like that chain we use, chaining all those together, that would be called like a gadget chain. It's going to show different examples of how you could maybe get to do code execution, or, all the different, overwriting secrets. Like if they had changed the file to instead we had to be authorized as the admin to view the flag, one of the things we could have done is change the Flask secret, and we could have like signed our own cookies or whatever and like got in that way. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully it kind of gives you an idea of what to do if you're like just hard stuck and can't figure out. And this is a more difficult challenge in that sense because, like I said, it's not immediately obvious. And that's where I said it might actually help if you don't understand what this function is doing, because maybe then you just Googled it and then that led you to like exactly where you needed to go. Where if you had a little more experience, you might just look at this and be like, okay, it's just like a recursive merge. Like the only thing I can change is, all those titles and stuff, because you didn't have the experience or weren't aware of the kind of under the hood stuff that's going on in Python. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I didn't want this video to be this long, but whatever. So if you did get something out of it and you are still listening to me ramble, like if you wanted to like or subscribe, that actually would help me a lot. And yeah, thanks for listening and take care.